Hi, I'm Jeanne Fiorini, and thanks for being here at the Tarot Tips. I'm glad to know that this compare and contrast idea that we've been working with through many videos in the recent months is being helpful. As I've said before, the tarot can be enigmatic, the tarot can be confusing, especially when cards within the deck look similarly, and we might say, well, what's the difference between this and that? So the fine-tuning of the differences really is going to enhance your readings. I think, it's easy to get, relatively easy, to get a general sense of the area that the card might be addressing, whether it's about a thinking function or a matter of emotions or a practical matter. But to be able to discern, the finer details of what makes one card different from another really will help you to understand the message of the cards, I think, a little bit more clearly, and also allow you to help, if you're working with other people, be more specific about what's going on for them and what they can do about it. So, we've had a request to talk about the High Priestess and the Moon, to do this compare and contrast idea. So that's going to be the topic of today's video. I'm going to put the images of the traditional version of the High Priestess and the Moon card up, so you can be looking at those while we're talking about them. Let's start with how they're similar. Visually, these cards often are the same colors. We see blue, sometimes gray, often we see a very ethereal kind of image in these cards. We see an image that we wouldn't necessarily see if we were walking down the street. It's not likely that we're going to see something that looks like what's depicted on either of these cards in our everyday experience. They are both strong water cards in the tarot, so their element is water. The High Priestess is ruled by the moon. Okay, we start right off here with something that feels a little paradoxical. High Priestess is ruled by the moon. The moon card is ruled by Pisces. So there's a little bit of, it's easy to think, well, the sun card's ruled by the sun, so why isn't the moon card ruled by the moon? I think some of that might be clear as we go through how these cards are different. A person could say that Pisces is the most mysterious of all of the astrological water signs. That's certainly true about the image and the meaning of what's behind the moon card. So they're both very strong and important water-oriented, feeling, internal, intuitive, spiritual, unconscious, etc. water kinds of images in the tarot. Both of these cards require patience. When these cards come up, the message in either one is just chill out, relax, pull back. This is not a place out of which to make any big decisions. We need to be, in both instances, listening on an intuitive level and on a spiritual level, maybe paying attention to what our dreams might be telling us. All of this is very non-linear with both of these cards. Each of these cards expresses an enigma. Oftentimes, or duality or polarity, often expressed in the tarot, as we've talked about in other videos, with the pillars. In the High Priestess, we see that she's positioned between the black pillar and the white pillar. In the Moon card, we also see pillars. Now they're gray, and we still have a sense of the activity in the card happening between those two pillars. Each of these cards is balancing or trying to reconcile or work with some kind of ambiguity, duality, opposing forces. each of these cards has a potential for wisdom and for a deep sense of knowing. And each of these cards also has a pretty significant potential for getting stuck. Sometimes this depends on how your personality is built, but sometimes it's for some people it's very easy to get into the I'm not quite sure, I need to be patient, because these are strong watery cards. On paper it's the opposite of the fire, which is about initiative and action that is proactive. Neither of these cards shows action or encourages us to be proactive. So, there's the fine line. How do we know when to be, when this is helpful, to be receptive, to be patient, to be really listening on an intuitive and emotional level? And when are we wallowing? When are we dragging our heels? When are we avoiding responsibility for taking action? That's when these cards would move into the negative. We're not going to talk about exactly that today. So a lot in common with these two cards. Obviously, just looking at them, I think you can see a visual similarity. Let's talk about how they're different. The High Priestess is connected as card 2 to card 11, which is Justice, and card 20, again another 2. Both of the Justice and Judgment are numerologically reduced down to 2. All of those 3 cards are all about knowing. So the High Priestess is a knowing that we hold or that is held, but we feel no responsibility or duty or impetus to do anything about that. So the High Priestess is essentially such a receptive card that her book is closed. She doesn't need to open the book. The High Priestess isn't necessarily telling us what she knows. So the High Priestess card essentially is about listening in order to understand and to know. The Moon card says we don't know anything. we are clueless. We are confused. So the Moon is about not knowing, not understanding, not having clarity. So there's one way that these two cards are different. The High Priestess is an archetypal personality. You can think of her as the guardian at the gate of the unconscious. I think of the High Priestess both of these cards I think of as places. The High Priestess is an image of the place where we go, or the place where all things are known. So again, she sits between those pillars of duality. She has her book of wisdom. All choices, all experiences are in potential in the High Priestess card. Those in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck card, the fruit on her curtain behind her are pomegranates filled with seeds. That's a very womb-like image. With this circular container having all this potential. So sometimes the High Priestess is called the womb of the spirit. So she's the personification of an energy that might be in this place of all potential and unknowing and all-knowingness. The Moon card is what is behind the veil. So the High Priestess sits in front of the veil, kind of, again, being the guardian of that doorway. When you're in the Moon card, and notice the perspective of the viewer on the traditional version of Rider-Waite-Smith, when we are looking at that card, we are in the water. We are in the place of not knowing. We are in the place where what is real and what is not real can be very confusing. You might be able to say that pathway coming out of the water is like a birth canal. So we have this similar womb idea, but in the High Priestess card, we're looking at the womb of creativity or of spirit or of knowing or of all potential. In the Moon card, we are in the soup. We are in that place. I like to think about the Moon card as if we were sitting at the bottom of the ocean and trying to look up and trying to discern what's happening out there. It's impossible to do. So again, not a place where we can be making conscious, clear decisions, but it is a place of potential. It's very embryonic in the Moon card. We could say that that pathway is a birth canal leading to the next card in the series, which is the Sun card, a card of birth, a card of expansion, a card of recognition. So everything in the Moon card often is very undefined. It's very, not to kind of use that word again, but it's very enigmatic. It lives in the world of, well, it doesn't really make sense, but keep sitting in that and see what realizations you come to, or see what truths are birthed out of that. So essentially the ways that these cards are different is that the High Priestess is in some ways a little bit safer because we can access High Priestess information, we can tune in and maybe pick up something intuitively, and we might have some choice about that. If the Moon card comes up, it really can indicate that we are in the swamp of not knowing. We are in a place where a larger force is overwhelming our clarity, our decisiveness, and we're wise to be still and wait for the fog to pass.